Hello YouTube. Today I want to talk about my experience learning German in graduate school. I'm currently doing my master's degree at the University of Chicago in religious studies with a particular focus on Islamic intellectual history. I'm mostly interested in early Islamic legal epistemologies, what later became known as usul fiqh. And German is a required part of the master's. You either have to do German or French, and that is to be able to read research materials that is produced in French or German secondary literature. Also, there are German and French translations of Arabic texts that might be useful for an academic to use. So the name of the course is German for Research Purposes that I'm taking. I'm choosing to do German, as anybody who's known my channel for quite some time. I've been studying German since I was about 13 years old, and I took it in high school, and I've self-studied the German language for quite some time, and it's gotten quite a bit rusty because, in my adult life, I haven't used it as much as I'd like to. I don't really have German friends who I can practice with on a regular basis. But that being said, I can still watch like German movies, German TV shows, and news and different things, and understand quite a bit. So sometimes it's hard for me to retrieve, and it's hard for me to have conversations just because I'm not doing that so much anymore. But definitely when it comes to comprehension and understanding, a lot of that is still there from when I was a teenager. And when I learned it in high school, the approach was what's become very, I want to say, trendy nowadays in language pedagogy or language instruction methodology, is that kind of moving away from the old school style of learning language through grammar tables and texts and memorizing verb conjugations and this and that I think a lot of people get bored with, and they move to like this trendier version of language instruction which emphasizes communication and conversation and writing and reading and listening, and this kind of like more holistic way of teaching language that has an emphasis on communication over and above grammatical accuracy. And I've also noticed that this is quite trendy amongst most of the polyglot community on YouTube also. And, everybody has different goals when learning different languages, different reasons, different purposes, and that's all good. Everybody can have their different aims and goals, and therefore different methodologies to achieve those aims and goals. And so when I was taking it in high school, it was very much for communication, and if we were taught grammar, it would be in a very indirect way, showing us lots of examples. We weren't told we were being taught grammar, but we'd intuitively start to pick it up through these examples that we were given over and over again. And there might be a tiny bit of grammatical explanation here and there, but not all that much. And if we made grammatical mistakes, we weren't often corrected. And so that's kind of like the background I have with my German. And for me, German was a very practical thing. I have family in Germany. They would come to visit, and I would be speaking it with them to communicate. And that was kind of my background with German. And then when I got to graduate school, when you're learning a language for a research purpose, it's all textual. And in order to read texts, you don't need to have a lot of vocabulary, or the focus is going to be primarily on grammar, because any word you find in a text, theoretically, you could just look up in a dictionary. And so in order to fully grasp the meaning, it's much better to know grammar, to understand what's happening with the sentence structurally and grammatically, And then semantically, or the meaning, you would just get by looking up words in the dictionary, as far as the meaning of individual words, I mean. And so the approach is the more classical approach, which you are memorizing conjugation tables, you are memorizing grammar, rules, and I mean, the main focus of the language is learning the grammar, which for me, I used to really hate it when I was younger, and I used to be very resistant to this type of language learning and language instruction. But as I've gotten older, once I kind of developed, I guess you would say maybe a base in the language, I realized I really needed grammar to help take my German to that next level. And even before I was in graduate school and all that stuff, I had been practicing German grammar. I'll show you one book. It's in some of my previous videos. I've always highly recommended this book, German Grammar Drills. You know, I kind of realized at that point that German grammar was something I needed, something I wanted to work on. I've also had this book for some time, German and Essential Grammar. And I have other books too related to grammar. But those were the main ones I was kind of using before graduate school. And especially when it comes to reading academic texts usually have very stringy, long sentences that are complicated in structure. And, well, academics like to show off just how smart they are. And so they like to use big words and like to sound fancy. And especially in German, the way they'll conjugate verbs is going to be a much different way so that they sound fancy. And so grammar is very important. And this is the main textbook we've been using at my class. It's called Reading German. And this is by Oxford University Press. And this book, I found it to be extremely useful. Most chapters will start out with a text, like a bilingual text, and then throughout the chapter it will have grammar explanations with exercises. And then in the back it will have reference, kind of like, I guess you'd say, paragraphs or sections to reference deeper into grammar and have concrete examples. As you can see, I've definitely been working with this book for the course. And so this is one that we've been using. The professor has also recommended we use this as a supplement. So this is Handbuch zur deutschen Grammatik, the handbook to German grammar, basically, which I also recommend for someone who's interested in improving their German grammar. But these books I found very useful in improving my German in general, and obviously the grammar. And with academic literature, you get a lot of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Connecting words, like however, albeit, on the other hand, and these types of kind of rhetorical devices or words to move along arguments, to move along a narrative, and so on and so forth. And so, I mean, those you just kind of have to memorize when you're learning other languages. That kind of academic language you're going to have to memorize. And, you know, it's difficult. And the only way it can be done is through rote memorization. It's stuff that's very difficult to just pick up naturally, because generally speaking, this is stuff that you're going to, like academic literature or just literature in general, you could just say the written word in language, it has its own flavor, it has its own taste, it has its own style. and it's different than spoken language. So merely listening, getting a lot of audio input, or having a lot of conversational experience is nothing like written text. And especially some languages get extremely formal in written word, and academic literature being probably some of the most formal. Um, it's just a different register of language. It's like code switching within the language. Just like some languages have a formal and informal way of speaking. Like in German, you can say du bist or sie sind, whether you're informal or formal. And with academic literature, there's just a lot you kind of have to learn through memorization that you're not going to get from any other way than rote memorization. And that's why these books are quite useful and handy. And, besides all the kind of like academic style that is part of academic writing, every field is going to have its own jargon. Every field has its own technical terms, and then every subfield within the field is going to have its own technical terms. And so it gets kind of quite complicated, even for someone who's a native speaker of English to go and read an academic text in English might be hard if they don't have exposure to that. There's going to be jargon in there they're going to have to look up in the dictionary. There's going to be stylistic features that they're probably not going to be familiar with. And so to help me out with that, I got this book, Modern Theological German. So it has a lot of words in it related to religion. It's not just only theological words per se or words related to theology, but even words related to ritual and other aspects of religion. But in the beginning, the first kind of half of this book is all texts in German. Theological texts, as well as medieval ones, as well as more modern ones. And some secondary literature from academics on theology, if I remember correctly. And then the rest of it is just kind of merely a dictionary of, certain words that are related to religion in German. So, let's see, there's a particular word that I'm looking for. And I noticed, I have this. I've had this dictionary since, 2003. Concise Oxford German Dictionary. And there's words that are in this theological dictionary that are not in this Oxford Dictionary. And this Oxford Dictionary has 150,000 words and phrases. So that's bigger than, a lot of dictionaries. That's a pretty good sized dictionary. But still, this one has a lot of words that are not found in it because, you're talking about religious jargon, right? So here's some word. Diveya, consecration, dedication, ordination, inauguration, initiation, solemn festivity. And from that you get Weihbischof, suffragan, bishop. Weihbrot, consecrated bread. This must be Weihheakt, solemn dedication, ceremony of ordination or consecration. Weihlos, profane. Weihen, to consecrate, to dedicate, to ordain, to sanctify, to bless. Weihstunde, hour of commemoration. Weihvoll, solemn, hallowed, holy. Die Weihnacht, die Weihnachten, Christmas. So you can see how this kind of gets a little bit more complicated with the religious vocabulary than perhaps your average dictionary. So I found that quite a useful text. And just to give you an example of some stuff in my field that I might read or that German would be very useful for, to give kind of a brief history, the Germans started very early on, along with the French, in kind of when secularization started taking place from the Renaissance to the Enlightenment. You had these quote-unquote modern universities that started to spring up, and they started to engage in, like, I guess you would say, secular Bible studies or history of the Bible. And from that sprung some linguists of Semitic languages, or Semiticists. And those are people who studied Hebrew, and in order to understand Hebrew, you'd also have to learn like Aramaic and Arabic and all those other Semitic languages out there. And the whole idea kind of was to be able to understand the Bible. And from that grew out people who wanted to specialize in Arabic and people who wanted to specialize in Islam specifically, or Middle Eastern history, or Islamic history, or whatever you want to call it. And so an early, I guess, Orientalist text, because Orientalism kind of sprang out of philology, linguistics, Semitic linguistics, and all those things, is this book here, Arabische Grammatik, Paradigmen or Paradigmen, Literatur, Übungsstücke und Glossar. So as you can see, I'm not a native German speaker, so my pronunciation will have an accent, but this is a very early text. Let's see when it was published. Let's see here. So it was published 1909. Here's like the title page if you're interested to see. So 1909. It says Verlag von Rote und Reichard. That's the publisher in Berlin. Looks like it was also printed in London and New York. So yeah, it's quite old here. But this book here is considered one of the best grammars of the Arabic language written in any European language. So here's some table of contents there. So here's nouns, looks at verbs up there. So it's talking about all the different verb forms here and that you find in Arabic. Here you have the imperative, the command, all these different kinds of things going on here. And here you have the genus of, looks like, nouns, syntax. A lot of these are the same as English, which is why I'm pronouncing them like English, because there's a lot of words that are quite similar in German to English, so when it comes to reading, sometimes you have that advantage. Here's a really cool section, Literatur, which has bibliographies of different genres of Arabic literature, and it also includes some secondary literature. So this is like a very useful book. It came recommended to me by Professor Fred Donner at the University of Chicago, and he said, you know, if this was to be translated into English, that would be quite an accomplishment, because it's such a well done grammar of the Arabic language. So if there's any German speakers who are watching that are interested in learning Arabic, this book is really phenomenal book, and I've used it and benefited from it. Also, you know, one of the earliest major Orientalists that came out of Germany was Ignaz Goldziher. Actually, he was originally a Hungarian Jew, if I remember correctly, but you know, he published mostly in German. So these are some of his famous books: Die Zacharieten, ihr Lehrsystem und ihre Geschichte. So that's about the Zahiri Madhab, which was a school of thought in Islamic jurisprudence they're known for being very literalistic, and he was kind of one of the first to write about them or research them, as far as I know, in the Western Academy. And he covers a lot of things regarding Islamic law, so it's not just simply, you know, Zahiris themselves, but he covers a lot of things regarding Islamic legal history and Islamic intellectual history, or Islamic thought in general. Another one is, this is kind of what Islamic studies used to be called, Mohammedan studies. So Mohammedanische Studien is the name of this book. This is volume 1. As far as I know, it's a 2-volume book, but you know, this is kind of, you could say, his magnum opus. So here he's talking about das Ihya von al-Ghazali. So he's talking about the Ihya Ulumuddin written by Imam al-Ghazali, Abu Hamid al-Ghazali, and Khatab al-Baghdadi, Ibn Abbas. So yeah, all kinds of stuff in here. And both of these, I mean, they have translations in English. But, you know, as always, it's better to access the original to see what's really meant. And there are many other books that have not been translated to English that still remain in German that are interesting to me. They're kind of earlier books. So in the American Academy, when it comes to Islamic legal studies, one of the main figure early on, by early on we're talking about like the 50s, 1950s, was Joseph Schacht. He was kind of the main figure who really, I guess you might say, pioneered the study of Islamic legal thought in the Western Academy in America. And his very famous book is called The Origins of Mohammedan Jurisprudence, Joseph Schacht, by Oxford University Press. And let's see, I want to say it was just published 1950. Looks like, yeah, first published 1950. They had a reprint in 1953 and 1959. So this is the 1959 version that I have here. So, you know, it's quite dated looking, obviously. Spent a pretty penny to get this collector's edition here. And so he's very famous, you know, he's got a lot of books in English here, but he also has a book in German that he edited. So his professor, his teacher while he was in graduate school, his name was Gotthelf Bergsträsser, and he has this famous book, Bergsträssers Grundzüge des Islamischen Rechts, and it says von Joseph Schacht. So it's kind of like the fundaments of Islamic law. And then Joseph Schacht posthumously edited this book after Bergsträsser's death, after he died. And Bergsträsser was an open anti-Nazi. And some people think that, you know, he died on a hiking accident in the Bavarian mountains. And some people think that, you know, he was killed in, I believe it was 1933, by Nazi hooligans. And this was published in 1935, posthumously, Verlag von Rote de Rote, which is still a very famous academic publisher in Germany today. If you want to know more about this stuff I'm talking about, like these certain books and stuff, you can also check out my academia.edu profile, which I'll put a link below, where you can go and see more of this stuff in depth. I have an annotated bibliography on German sources for early Hanafi studies, which is what I am into. I've also translated the table of contents of this book. But this book is also very interesting. You know, there's some interesting stuff in here about Islamic law. He cites very interesting sources and German secondary literature as well as primary Arabic sources. So it's a very cool book, and there are some very good observations in this book. So, I mean, it's good to know just even for the history of one's field. For me in the Western Academy, I'm trying to be a professor, you know, specializing in Islamic legal history under the rubric of ritual studies, and I want to teach in a religious studies department someday, or maybe a history department, or, you know, whatever, whatever type of jobs may be out there. I'm open to everything, but I just wanted to give you guys an example of kind of the stuff I'm trying to read and the stuff that I'm working with. And for something a little bit more contemporary, there's this series here. It's called Die Religionen der Menschheit. And this one is volume 2, Der Islam, politische Entwicklungen und theologische Konzepte von Montgomery Watt and Michael Marmura. So Montgomery Watt and Michael Marmora are academics that published in English predominantly, but this is one of their publications in German that has not been translated in English, and it's about like political. It's about theology under like in a political context throughout history, how theology developed along with developments in politics, and especially in here it's focusing on the Islamic world and Islamic theology. So that's kind of an interesting text. One thing I did find, though, I'm particularly interested in a figure in early Islamic history. He's a student of the famous eponymous jurist Abu Hanifa. His name's Muhammad Shaybani. And Muhammad Shaybani, most of his work is very understudied in the Western Academy. In fact, his main works are not really discussed at all in secondary literature. And so one of them is Al-Jami' al-Saghir, which is kind of like a matan to learn basic Islamic law. It's like a basic, I guess you might say, textbook or liturgical book of ritual. And here is kind of like the cover page. It's a PhD dissertation. He translates a section of Al-Jami' al-Saghir and into German, and that's the only, it hasn't been translated into any other European language to the best of my knowledge. It's from Ivan Dimitrov, and it was published in 1908, it looks like. But what's very fascinating about this text is that he has a 39-page introduction where he gives a lot of, you could say, historical context to this text that he is translating. And so I translated a paragraph of it, or I've attempted to translate a paragraph of it, and it's just a draft. I'm going to try to read it in German, and hopefully native German speakers can try to correct me where I make any pronunciation mistakes. And of course I'm not a native speaker, so maybe the flow of the sentences might not sound so good. And then I'm going to read the English translation that I have made, or my best attempt at translating the text. And this is from page 16 of the text, if anybody wants to Google, look up the PDF and follow along. Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn al-Hasan ibn Farqad al-Shaybani ist wahrscheinlich im Jahre 132 der Hijra in Wasit auf der Reise seiner Eltern von Syrien nach Irak geboren, zu einer Zeit, als sich die größten Umwälzungen im politischen Leben des Arabischen Reichs vollzogen. Sein Vater stammte aus dem Dorfe Kharasta bei Damaskus und gehörte der syrischen Miliz an. Nach einer anderen Version war er ein Freigelassener der Beni Shayban. Über die äußeren Lebensverhältnisse des zukünftigen großen Juristen sind wir, ebenso wie über seine Beziehungen zu den Wortführern der damaligen Rechtswissenschaft sehr ungenügend unterrichtet. Die allgemein verbreitete Ansicht ist, dass er zwar eine Zeit lang auch den Unterricht des Abu Hanifa genossen habe, jedoch seine Ausbildung fast ausschließlich dem genialen Schüler des Systemgründers, dem Abu Yusuf, verdanke. Den Sohn, das ist Muhammad al-Shaybani, führte sein selbstständiges Forschen und Urteilen Ra'i, ist hier dem Ijtihad gleich. Frühzeitig zu Abu Hanifa in die Schule. Die eigentliche Wehe gab ihm aber Abu Yusuf. Dies mag wahr sein. Dafür spricht der Umstand, dass Shaybani selbst in seinem Al-Jami' al-Saghir Abu Hanifa und Abu Yusuf an der Spitze jedes einzelnen Kapitels aus Gewährsmänner anführt, was allerdings in seinem übrigen Werken nicht geschehen ist. So I'm going to bear with me here. I'm going to translate it into English the very best I can. Abu Abdullah Muhammad ibn Hassan ibn Farqad al-Shaybani was born probably on his parents' travel from Syria to Iraq in the year 132 Hijrah in the city of Wasat, in a time when the biggest upheavals in the political life of Arab empires had taken place. His father originated from the village of Harasta near Damascus and belonged to the Syrian militia. In another version, he was a freed slave client, Mawla of Bani Shayban. In regards to the external living conditions of the great future jurist, and likewise his ties to contemporaneous spokesmen of the law, we are very uninformed. The general rumored view is that he allegedly had the benefit of a time, also the education, from Abu Hanifa. However, his training almost exclusively is owed to the ingenious teacher of the system founders, Abu Yusuf. The son, i.e. Muhammad Shaybani, presented his independent research and opinion, al-Ra'i is here the same as ijtihad, in the early period to Abu Hanifa in the school of jurisprudence, that the true inauguration gave him Abu Yusuf. This could be true. Therefore, the circumstance says that Shaybani himself, in his Jami' al-Saghir, quotes Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf, and it says der Spitze, I think that was, and I think that might be the colophon of manuscripts. So he quotes Abu Hanifa and Abu Yusuf in the colophon of every chapter as warranters, which certainly was not seen in the rest of his other works. So this is my best attempt at a translation, and like I said, you can go to the PDF of the text that I was referring to if you'd like to see the original German and read it for yourself and see the footnotes that goes along with all that in the original German. But that's kind of like the stuff that I'm up to right now. It's a very different way of learning languages than I think most people discuss or talk about on YouTube, which is kind of the reason I want to bring it up here. I might also do some future videos about, like, what does it mean to learn a language for the purpose of reading texts, and how does that change the way we might approach learning languages. If you're someone who likes to read novels, for instance, and you're learning a certain language to access, novels of your favorite author in the original language, maybe Dostoevsky or who knows what, the Brothers Grimm or Goethe or Nietzsche or whatever it is you like, Michel Foucault or whatever it may be, you want to access the original language, and that's going to require a different method of language study. So like I said, if you want some more information on some of the stuff I'm doing in school, you can go to my academia profile. Also check out my Facebook page, and I'll put that in the description box below also. But I'm very interested to get feedback from you guys and to see what you think about all this. For people who maybe don't learn languages for text, I'd be interested to know kind of what your views on all this is. And I'm thinking about maybe making a video about how Arabic in particular can be studied to read classical texts, to access classical Arabic literature and Islamic religious literature. Some grammar books that I found particularly useful is this series here, An-Nahw al-Wadih, which maybe I'll talk about in a future video more in depth. And also in my line of study, I'm going to be expected to learn French eventually here, and probably Turkish and Persian, so those are languages also I'm interested in being able to read for research purposes. But yeah, any feedback from you guys, I want to know what you're thinking, about this in response to all this I've presented here. And sorry this video is a bit longer than, many of the videos I've made in the past, but I feel like, sometimes it's fun to go in depth in these subjects. I certainly find that more rewarding, but I'll cut the video short here because I'll just keep blabbing on unless somebody stops me, so I better stop myself. Check yourself before you wreck yourself.